Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly down a foggy dockside toward a creaking Genoese ship just now mooring in the Sicilian port of Messina. The wood is dark with moisture, the kind that soaks into your bones. Something's not right. The crew isn't rushing to tie up. In fact, some are slumped strangely still on the deck, and that smell, it's not fish. It's not even death in the usual way. It's heavier, fleshier, like rot mixed with sea salt, and the metallic tang of something ancient waking up. You're about to walk into the most terrifying biological event Europe has ever known, and you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, post your location and local time. I want to know who's listening to this while the rest of their town sleeps. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the damp gangplank and notice no one's stopping you. The men lying on deck aren't groaning or sleeping. They're just there, eyes open, flies already circling. You step back instinctively. A sailor, the only one upright, grabs your sleeve. His skin's waxy, marbled with black bruises. He wheezes two words, "Don't dock." Then he drops. It's 1347. And the Black Death has made landfall in Europe. People don't know it yet. But these ships have carried more than trade goods. Nestled in the grain are fleas. On the fleas, rats. And in those rats, a microscopic killer named Yersinia pestis. No one's immune, not even you. The city erupts in confusion. Monks swing incense, hoping to purify the air. Women clutch children tighter than ever. You overhear wild theories, bad humors, divine punishment, even poisoned wells. But the truth is simpler and more brutal. This thing is fast, and it's hungry. You find yourself wandering the streets of Messina, then Genoa, and later, Marseille. The plague moves faster than your feet can carry you. At first, it's just coughing, then swellings, huge black lumps, buboes in the groin, neck, and armpits. You watch a boy cry as his mother lays him down and leaves. She can't afford to die with him. Here's the thing most people don't realize. The Black Death didn't just kill. It shattered the idea of a knowable world. One moment, a city's bustling with trade and sermons. The next, silence, doors boarded, markets empty, bells tolling endlessly. You pass a man wearing a full bird-beaked mask stuffed with herbs cloves, rose petals, mint. That's a plague doctor. Though calling him a doctor is generous, still, people trust the mask. It makes them feel safer, like the beak can sniff out death before it touches you. You huddle in a church one evening, desperate for answers. The priest's sermon echoes against stone walls. He says, this is a punishment for sin, that repentance will stop the sickness. But even as he speaks, a deacon behind him collapses. The priest doesn't pause. He just keeps going, voice trembling slightly, sweat beading at his collar. Back outside, the stars are cold and indifferent. You try to sleep against a brick wall, knees pulled tight, but the sounds of coughing keep you awake. You're no longer afraid of dying. You're afraid of surviving, of waking up alone. And here's a strange tidbit. Some people dance. Yep. Whole groups form spontaneous processions, spinning and jumping through streets. Historians still argue whether this was religious ecstasy, stress-induced madness, or some early version of protest. But you watch one of these dances with dry eyes. There's something tragic in their wild rhythm, like they're trying to stomp out the plague with their own feet. Your journey takes you inland now, to Florence, then onward to Paris. The smell of burning herbs follows you. People light fires indoors, believing smoke will cleanse the air. The richer households hang posies on their doors. You pluck one on impulse. It smells like lavender and desperation. Statistically, you're in trouble. Best estimates suggest the Black Death wipes out anywhere between 30 to 60% of Europe's population. That's not just a demographic dip, it's an evolutionary landslide. Entire families vanish, entire bloodlines vanish, and in the quiet left behind, something peculiar begins to happen. You start noticing a pattern. Some people get sick, yes, but don't die. They shake and sweat and cry out, but then they heal, slower, weaker, different, but alive. Their children seem odd, too tougher, maybe more alert, like something primal just clicked into place. But that's a mystery for later. For now, the winter winds pick up. Snow coats abandoned carts. Dogs wander without masters. The cities echo with emptiness. You wrap your cloak tighter and head for the countryside. Maybe the fresh air will help. Maybe it won't, because even in the hills, the plague whispers its way under door frames and into lungs. It's a democracy of death. Serfs and nobles, scholars and shepherds, nobody's special. Except, maybe, your fingers tremble, not from fever, but from a deeper suspicion that somehow your body is changing, responding, adapting. You're not sure what's happening yet, but under your skin, something ancient stirs. But we'll get to that. For now, you fall asleep under an ash tree, lulled by wind and fear, and a single question: why you? You wake to the sound of coughing, not your own, but someone else's, ragged and rhythmic, like a wet saw against old wood. A boy leans against the same ash tree, eyes glassy, limbs twitching in his sleep. You think about moving away. You think about mercy. But mostly, you think about how fast it's spreading. There's no escaping it now. The plague rides in the air, swims through rivers, clings to clothes. It lingers on prayer beads and coins and doorknobs if people had those. Every surface feels like a gamble, and this thing doesn't waste time. It's not like smallpox or measles, which like to drag their feet. The Black Death is rude, efficient, unapologetically brutal. You make your way toward a village, if it even counts as one anymore. The road is too quiet. Trees lean inward like eavesdropping old women. You pass a cart loaded with bodies, arms hanging over the sides like dropped marionettes. The driver stares ahead, humming to himself. You don't make eye contact. They say the plague hits in 3 forms. You've seen the bubonic type, with the swollen black lymph nodes that look like bruised plums. Then there's septicemic, where the blood turns against you, and death comes in a whisper. No buboes, no warning, just sudden collapse. And the rarest, most terrifying pneumonic, airborne, a single cough, and you're done. You don't even need a flea for that one. You reach the village and immediately wish you hadn't. The first house is boarded, the second burned, at the third, the doors open, But you see no movement, just a body slumped in the doorway, as if trying to escape. You don't look too closely. You don't need to. Here's a mainstream historical fact you probably didn't learn in school. In some areas, entire regions lost over 75% of their population. England, France, the Italian states, none were spared. London alone was struck so hard that entire parishes vanished from the tax records. Historians still argue whether these numbers are overblown or undercounted. Records from the time are unreliable at best, written by men terrified they'd be next. But there are clues everywhere. Skeletons piled in plague pits, hurriedly buried, sometimes layered like lasagna. Coins from 1348 found in untouched pockets. Traces of Yersinia pestis DNA still hiding in molars. Time has a way of preserving what fear tried to forget. As you wander the village, you hear chanting. Not Gregorian, not liturgical, no Latin here, just the rhythmic stomp of feet and a low drone of voices. Flagellants. You've stumbled upon one of the strangest human responses to mass death, self-inflicted punishment. They move through the streets barefoot, backs bare and bleeding, whipping themselves in synchronized arcs. You watch, transfixed and slightly horrified. They believe suffering can cleanse the sin that caused the plague. You're not sure if it's bravery or madness, but either way, it doesn't work. The sick still die. The healthy still become sick. But the process gives people something the plague has stolen control. Your stomach growls. Hunger has a way of shrinking existential horror into something chewable. You find a half loaf of bread in an abandoned inn. It's dry. It tastes like dust and salt. You eat anyway, and that's when you notice something. The innkeeper's ledger, still open on the counter, scribbled in the margins away from numbers and names is a note. Still untouched, Elena. Never even coughed. That name will echo in your mind for days, because the more you listen, the more you hear about survivors. People who should have died, but didn't. People who tended to the sick and never fell ill. You hear about a woman in Provence, a man in Norwich, even a shepherd boy in Bavaria, all exposed, all alive. At first, you assume it's luck, divine protection, maybe, but a whisper in your mind suggests something else. Biology. You've read enough to know that not everyone reacts the same way to disease. Maybe there's something in these people that the plague can't touch, a kind of natural armor, invisible but real. That idea haunts you as you leave the village. You wrap your scarf tighter, even though you know it won't help. The cold is creeping in now, and winter makes the plague worse. People huddle indoors, sharing fires, sharing fleas. The sickness loves a cozy room. Your feet ache. You step into a stream to rinse off mud, and the water stings your skin's cracked and raw. It feels like punishment, like your body is fraying at the edges. You pass another procession, this one quieter. Just a few mourners walking behind a donkey-pulled cart. On the cart, a tiny body wrapped in a blanket. No one speaks. One woman sobs, softly, like she's trying not to disturb the dead. You feel a lump in your throat, but no tears come. That night, you sleep in a barn. The straw smells sour, but at least it's dry. You listen to the wind and try not to think about Elena, about the others who survived. What makes them different? Did they even know? Could their children be immune too? You remember something else, something quirky and dark. During the worst outbreaks, people sometimes bricked up their houses from the inside. Entire families entombed themselves, hoping isolation would save them. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes they died anyway, trapped in their own faith and walls. As sleep tugs at your bones, your thoughts drift. If this plague is shaping who lives and who dies, is it also shaping the future? Who gets to pass on their blood? Who becomes history? And who becomes genetic memory? The barn creaks. An owl hoots. You close your eyes, and just before sleep takes you, you think you hear breathing that isn't yours. But when you look, you're alone. You wake shivering, covered in a thin frost that's crept through cracks in the barn boards. The straw beneath you has flattened into damp patches, and your breath curls visibly into the stale air. For a moment, you forget where you are until the stillness reminds you. No roosters crow, no carts rattle past, just the low creak of timber and the distant rhythmic thump of something being dug. You follow the sound, feet crunching on frost-hardened mud. Over a small hill, you see them, a cluster of men with shovels, faces hidden beneath scarves, digging trenches in the half-frozen earth. The pit is long and already filled halfway with bodies. Limbs jut from bundles of cloth like broken broomsticks. One man gags as he works. Another mutters prayers, shovel scraping with a sound that could skin your teeth. These are plague pits, mass graves. No names, no ceremonies, just dirt and silence. You watch for a long time. There's something both horrifying and weirdly peaceful about the motion dig. Drag, drop, cover, like a sad metronome keeping time in a world gone off key. Later, you find yourself outside a churchyard. The cemetery is full. Graves marked with whatever could be found: shoes, broken pottery, wooden spoons, anything to say someone mattered here. Someone lived. But it's not the graves that draw you in, it's the living. Huddled near the chapel's warm stone wall are a group of survivors. Some are praying, others just stare. You sit beside them, and slowly, they begin to talk. A woman tells you how her entire family died in 3 days. Her voice is hoarse. She hasn't cried, she says. Not once. Her eyes are too dry. A boy nearby hums tunelessly, clutching a dog that looks more like bones than fur. Then someone says it, the strange part. Some of us don't get sick. Not really. A few nod. You lean in. My sister nursed all 5 of us, says a gaunt man. She never even sneezed. You hear it again. A pattern. These aren't just lucky people, they're different. Survivors who didn't just avoid the plague. They stood in it, breathed it, held the dying, and walked away. It makes your skin prickle. You look around at the others, bone thin, haunted, but breathing. You're seeing something rare, not just endurance, inheritance. There's a theory modern scientists whisper it now, in labs lined with glass and steel, that the Black Death didn't just kill millions, it reshaped the gene pool of Europe. The idea is simple. If a disease wipes out a huge portion of a population, whoever survives does so for a reason, a hidden trait, an immune quirk, a bit of code in the blood that says not today. And those survivors, they pass that code on. Historians still argue whether the Black Death acted as a kind of genetic bottleneck, compressing and refining human biology like pressure turning coal into diamonds. But if it did, The change wouldn't be visible in one lifetime. It would echo forward, through children, and their children, and well, maybe even you. You follow a man named Jervis for a while. He's gruff, but his hands are steady and he doesn't flinch around the sick. He tells you his grandmother never feared death, said she could feel disease coming like bad weather. You ask if she ever got sick. He shakes his head, not once. You start to wonder, is there something in Jervis, in that woman who fed her whole family? In Elena, remember her something that the plague simply couldn't touch. Back in the village, you help load a cart with what little food remains. Root vegetables, some dried apples, a wheel of hardened cheese. You take turns handing out scraps. It feels strange, like rebuilding. Then you see something odd. A boy trips, scraping his leg on a stone. You offer a cloth, but someone stops you. Don't worry, they say he heals fast. And sure enough, within an hour, the wound's already scabbing over. Coincidence, maybe, but maybe not. The idea creeps in like smoke through a cracked window. What if the survivors aren't just lucky? What if they're different at a cellular level? There's a real, documented case. Something fringe but fascinating. In the 1990s, scientists discovered that some Europeans carry a gene mutation called CCR5-32. It blocks a specific pathway viruses use to enter cells. Today, it's mostly discussed in the context of HIV resistance, but some researchers believe this mutation may have been favored by selective pressure during the Black Death. The timing lines up eerily well. You wonder if that boy has it, or Gervais, or you. You lie awake that night in a shared hayloft, curled under a borrowed cloak, and think about inheritance, about how grief travels through families, like wind through grass, but maybe strength does too. Maybe, even now, deep in your marrow, something ancient is remembering. The moonlight catches the faces of those sleeping near you, lined, soft, twitching in dreams. Some of them will die soon, others will live and never know why, and the dirt won't care. But maybe the future will. Just as you drift off, someone whispers near the ladder, "There's a healer up north, doesn't use herbs, just touch, and none of her patients die." You open your eyes. That's the kind of lead you can't ignore. You head north. It's not a decision so much as a compulsion, like something tugging behind your ribs. The rumor of a healer who doesn't use herbs, who simply touches people and they recover. It sounds like a fairy tale, sure, but what else do you have? The roads are treacherous, but no more so than sitting still. And besides, if she exists, maybe she holds the answers no one else dares to chase. You travel with a merchant caravan for a while well. A merchant and what's left of his family. He used to trade silk, spices, perfume. Now he trades salt, threadbare cloaks, and stories. His daughter walks barefoot, despite the ice. She says it keeps her alert. The merchant mutters, "You're not convinced that's true." But she hasn't coughed once, and that's enough for you. You camp by ruined abbeys, half-collapsed barns, the occasional hollowed-out manor house. At night, you huddle by the fire, listening to the wind rattle bones of trees. People tell tales to pass the time, stories of ghost monks, demon cats, singing wells. But beneath the superstition, a theme pulses. There are some who don't get sick, some whose bodies don't betray them. One woman claims her neighbor drank plague-tainted milk and never even sneezed. Another swears her newborn smells different, like fennel and ozone. The line between folklore and fact, very blurry. Eventually, you reach the edge of a dense forest, black as spilled ink. Beyond it, they say, is a small village where the healer lives. No one dares go in, but a few claim to have seen her, always from afar. A tall figure in gray robes, a hand raised. People stop coughing. Naturally, you step into the forest. The trees close around you like gossiping crones. Every twig snap makes your heart hiccup, but the deeper you go, the quieter the world becomes. Birds don't sing here. You walk in hush and shadow until you hear it laugh. Soft, female. You freeze. There, up ahead, is a clearing, and in the middle of it, a small cottage made of stone and moss. Smoke curls from the chimney. Someone is home. You knock. No answer, but the door creaks open. Inside, it smells like thyme and beeswax. Dried herbs hang from the rafters. Not strange in itself, but none are local. You see saffron, frankincense, even what looks like powdered rhino horn. Exotic, expensive, forbidden. A woman appears behind you. You're not sick, she says. Not a question. You jump, spin. She's older than you expected, gray-haired, hawk-eyed, hands steady, back straight. She looks at you the way a tailor examines a bolt of cloth. Curious, not unkind, but measuring. I don't get many visitors, she continues, not ones who walk. You ask if she's the one they talk about, the healer, who doesn't use potions or charms. She smiles, just barely. I use something much older. She asks you to sit. You do, and then she touches your wrist, lightly, nothing dramatic, no glowing. No gasps, just warmth, and the faintest tingling that could be real, or just nerves. You're not sick. She repeats, but you carry something. What do you mean? She leans closer. Her breath smells like cloves. I mean, your body remembers. Even if your mind doesn't, that's when it hits you. She's not talking about memories you made. She's talking about the ones your ancestors did, the kind that live in blood and bone. And suddenly, all those survivors, Elena, Gervais, the boy with the fast healing leg, they're not just lucky, they're legacy. The healer tells you what she believes, though she admits not everyone agrees. She thinks that certain lineages, families that survived the Black Death, developed resistance, not immunity necessarily, but a kind of internal vigilance. Their immune systems are like border guards who've seen too much. They react faster, more aggressively. Modern science would later echo this. Researchers have found traces of this idea in genome studies. One famous example, a spike in immune system gene variants related to TLR and Reshape proteins. They're part of how your body recognizes and destroys invaders. In some European populations, these genes show signs of rapid evolution around the 14th century. The plague didn't just kill its selected. Historians still argue whether this selection had long-term benefits or came with trade-offs. Some theorize that an overactive immune system might help against infections, but lead to autoimmune issues centuries later. The legacy of survival might carry side effects. You stay with the healer for a few days. She teaches you to listen to your body, to track your breath, your heartbeat, your hunger, She says pain is often a translation error, a message you're misunderstanding. The body speaks. She whispers. Most people just don't want to hear what it's saying. One night, over bitter tea, she shares something personal. Her mother died of plague. Her father didn't. Neither did she. She was 5. I remember hiding under the table while they buried her outside. She says, I didn't cry. I waited for it to be my turn. It never came. She never married, never left. People come to her when they're desperate. Most leave healed, some don't. You ask if she's immune. No, she says, but I'm different. My body walks sideways through danger, like smoke through bars. That phrase sticks with you. On your last morning, she gives you something small, a locket with a scrap of linen inside. It belonged to a girl who survived 3 outbreaks. She says, touch it when you feel fear. You don't know if it's symbolic or something stranger, but you tuck it into your satchel anyway, as you leave. She watches from the doorway, arms crossed. Go east, she calls. There's a monastery there. The brothers are keeping records. They might help you understand more. You nod, thank her, and step back into the forest. You notice something as you walk the trees. Don't feel quite so ominous now. The wind feels warmer, or maybe it's just that. For the first time in weeks, you feel like you're carrying something more than just questions. Something ancient, something persistent. But when you open the locket to peek at the cloth, you swear you see something else tucked inside. A single, silvery strand of hair. You follow the rising sun eastward, toward the monastery she mentioned. It's a long walk, days through villages, half swallowed by weeds. Past barns turned into stables for goats that now outnumber people. You see so few travelers, it's like the world has hit pause. Even the birds seem reluctant to sing. But eventually, you crest a hill, and there it is, nestled in a shallow valley, surrounded by a crumbling wall of river stones. Stands the monastery. Its roof tiles are missing in patches, like a head with mange. But the bell tower still stands proud. You hear chanting thin, off-key, but unmistakably human. And in these times, that's enough to pull your feet forward. At the gate, a young monk meets you. His name is Brother Hugo, and he looks like he's been awake since the year began. He eyes your locket, then nods. She sent you, he says, and steps aside. Inside, it smells of beeswax and ink. The monks are copying texts, not scripture, but ledgers line after line of names, places, symptoms, deaths, a whole room of parchment, whispering the story of the plague. Brother Hugo explains after the first wave. The order chose to document everything. Who lived, who didn't, what they ate, how fast they died, who survived, and why. It was a desperate attempt to find patterns, meaning, and maybe hope. You spend hours, then days poring over the records. Hugo helps translate when needed, his finger following looping Latin script. You spot familiar patterns, certain families untouched by multiple outbreaks, villages with inexplicably low death tolls. Some of it sounds like luck, but over time, too much stacks up. One note reads, entire household survived despite nursing infected kin. None show signs of fever. Another, more chilling child recovered within hours. Veins glowed briefly. Witnesses frightened. You pause. Veins glowed. Brother Hugo laughs dryly, likely metaphor, but still, he leans in. Some monks believe God spared these people. Others say it's the devil's work. Me, I think it's blood. You ask him what he means. He leads you to the cellar. There, in stone coolness, are rows of sealed glass jars, each holding dried blood samples. Old monk science, carefully collected from survivors, labeled in ink faded to whispers. These, Hugo says, are what the abbot calls keys. Keys to understanding. Of course, they didn't have microscopes or gene sequencing back then, but they felt something was in the blood. Something not easily named. You hold one jar up to the light. The dust makes it glow like a tiny crimson galaxy. He tells you of Brother Thomas, a monk who died years ago but left behind strange drawings, organs, lines, flowcharts of the body's defenses, primitive immunology, and one sketch that makes your throat tighten a stick figure surrounded by jagged lines. With the words, "He walks unharmed." You wonder, how did he know? Historians still argue whether such early ideas of immunity were coincidence, folk magic, or precursors to science. But standing here, surrounded by parchment and blood, it feels like something deeper, like a forgotten language of survival. One evening, Hugo brings out something special, a box, locked with rusted iron. Inside are letters, not between monks, but survivors. First-hand accounts, uncensored. You read them by candlelight. I held my mother's hand as she coughed blood. My brother fell next, but I stayed healthy. It's like it feared me. Another, I hear them whisper when I walk past. They think I made a deal, but I did nothing. I only lived. And this one, barely legible. The healer touched me. I haven't aged since. You blink, reread. Surely exaggeration or madness. Yet something about the wording makes your arms gooseflesh. I haven't aged since. Hugo notices your reaction. There are rumors, he admits, that some survivors didn't just resist the plague. They changed how? No one knows. But sometimes people vanish, and years later, someone matching their description turns up. Looking the same, you sit back. It's too much. It has to be myth. Right still, you remember the healer, her eyes, sharp and timeless, the silver hair tucked into the locket. You start to ask Hugo something else, but the bell rings urgently. You follow him up the stairs and outside. A rider has arrived dusty, panicked. He speaks of a new outbreak, just a few miles west. People are already dying. Again. The monks prepare immediately. Some gather herbs, others ready carts for the dead. But your thoughts race, because this time, you're not afraid. Not quite. You find yourself volunteering to help. You, of all people, Hugo hands you a mask soaked in vinegar, and off you go, back into it, toward the rot, the breathless homes, the awful weight of returning grief. But here's the strange part as you walk among the sick, offering broth, lifting limbs, wiping brows. You feel calm. Even when someone coughs blood onto your hands, you don't flinch. You wonder if the healer saw it in you. That night, back at the monastery, you sit alone with Brother Hugo under a sky webbed with stars. You ask the question that's been burning in your gut for days. What if we're not just surviving? What if we're becoming something else? He's silent for a long time. Then he says, Would that be a curse or a gift? You don't know, but you do know you want to find out. As he heads back inside, he turns and adds, "You should visit the lowlands next. There's a woman there, midwife turned researcher, obsessed with patterns, thinks the plague is evolving alongside us." Another thread. You pocket the name he gives you and stand, staring at the moon. It looks different tonight, not because it's brighter, but because you are, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you realize this story, your story isn't just about death anymore. It's about adaptation. The lowlands stretch before you like a sleeping beast, gentle hills, wide meadows, little brooks that braid themselves between knuckles of rock and willow. It's oddly beautiful, and after the soot-stained grief of the monastery and forest, this feels almost dishonest. Nature dares to bloom. Wildflowers nod as if nothing has happened. But you know better. You know the quiet doesn't mean safety, it means waiting. You find the woman easily. People in the region speak of her with that same wary reverence they gave the healer. She sees things, one farmer says, but not with her eyes. Her name is Adela. She used to be a midwife, then a herbalist, then something harder to name, part scientist, part historian, part priestess of the plague's strange legacy. Adela lives in a long, low house made of timber blackened with age. It leans into the slope of a hill like it's too tired to stand upright. Inside, it smells of garlic, wool, and paper, so much paper, scrolls, ledgers, folded charts, and hand-drawn diagrams thumbtacked to wooden beams. "You're here for the pattern," she says, barely glancing at you. You blink. "Yes." She hums. "Good. You're late." You soon learn she's been tracking plague recurrence and resistance for over a decade. Not just who dies, but who doesn't, and what those people have in common. Their diets, their habits, their family trees. Her notes are meticulous and unsettling. You notice names repeating, names you saw at the monastery, names the healer mentioned in passing, names that show up again and again, even centuries apart. "I think the plague chooses," she says softly, "and I think it remembers." The notion is almost poetic if it weren't so terrifying. She shows you a map dotted with red ink. Each dot, she explains, is a location where resistance was unusually high. Not total immunity, but something more stubborn, more intelligent. You raise an eyebrow. "You're saying the plague thinks." "No," she corrects. "I'm saying it adapts. And so do we." That's the heart of her theory, that the Black Death wasn't just a catastrophe, but a catalyst. It forced evolution to hit fast forward. You, me, everyone alive today. We might be carrying echoes of that ancient encounter. She believes the survivors passed on more than just genes. They passed on immune profiles shaped in fire. Your body doesn't just react to pathogens. It carries ancestral instructions for how to react, like a haunted manuscript written in flesh. Mainstream historians tend to scoff at her. She admits, too speculative, they say, but others, fringe immunologists, folk medicine experts, even a few open-minded archaeologists have started to listen, because in some regions, resistance really is stronger, and not just to plague, to everything. She shares one oddity in certain pockets of northern England. Blood samples show unusually high levels of CC-SPAVD32, a mutation that protects against both the plague and, weirdly, HIV. She leans in and whispers, "That gene might be Plague's fingerprint." You stare at her. "So the Black Death helped us survive the future. Maybe," she says, "but maybe it also cursed us." Because here's the other half of her research. Those same bloodlines often show higher rates of autoimmune diseases, lupus, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes. Your immune system learns to fight back, but sometimes it fights too hard. It sees enemies where there are none. It burns the village to save the cottage. Historians still argue whether this evolutionary trade-off is real or merely coincidence. But for Adela, the pattern is too strong to ignore. "The cost of survival," she mutters, "is vigilance without rest." You help her gather herbs one morning: nettles, dock leaves, mugwort. She walks fast, talks faster. "You know," she says, brushing a spider off her sleeve, "some survivors pass down rituals as if those held the power. Touch this, eat that. Never enter a home on a Wednesday." But it wasn't the ritual, it was the body. The ritual just gave it shape. You ask what that means for you. She eyes you. "Have you been sick?" You shake your head. Not once you hesitate. No fevers, no nausea, no coughs, even when others dropped around you. It hits you then, the little moments. The way you walk into danger without dread. The strange energy in your bones when you sit still too long. The way children quiet when they're near you, like you hum on a different frequency. Della nods. "Thought so." You feel warm, but not in a comforting way. More like you've been marked, and the mark is glowing now. That night, over a meal of root soup and flatbread, she tells you a story. "Long ago," she says, "before the first big wave, her great-grandmother dreamt of a dark mist creeping through the village. In the dream, it stopped at her door, sniffed, and moved on. When the real plague came, everyone around her died. She didn't, and she never got sick, not even once. Her children were the same. Dreams, visions, prophecies, call them what you will. But Adela thinks they're memory, deep memory, body memory. You sleep in the loft, among dried herbs and moth-eaten blankets. The wind whispers through the beams, and for the first time in a while, you dream too of old bones, of ash, of glowing veins, of a girl in gray robes standing in a forest, holding a strand of hair that twists like smoke. You wake with a name on your lips. Thelma. You don't know who she is, but Adela does. She goes very still. "Thelma was my teacher," she says quietly. "Disappeared 10 years ago. Said she was following the source. I haven't heard from her since." You ask what the source is. "I don't know," she says, "but if you've dreamed of her, maybe you're ready." You leave the next morning with new maps, a list of names, and a warning. "Some truths change you," Adela says, pressing a hand to your shoulder. "Be sure you want to be changed." You walk away with the locket thumping against your chest like a second heart. The wind smells of fire and lavender. A new storm brews on the horizon, and something tells you that what comes next will be stranger than anything you've seen so far. Because you're not just following a disease anymore. You're following a thread of humanity itself, pulled through time by blood, loss, and a question that won't let go. What does it really mean to survive? The trail grows harder now, less of a path, more of a rumor whispered through cracked windows and side eyes from old women. You ask about Thelma in every village, but the name lands like a stone in still water. One man mutters that she was seen heading into the Black Hills. Another insists she vanished into a plague pit and never came back. But then an old nun in a convent where the walls hum with bees, tells you the truth. She went underground, the nun says, handing you a torn piece of cloth. Below the ruined city, she was looking for the beginning. The beginning. You remember Adela's phrase, the source. And so, with little more than breadcrumbs, you head toward the ruined city. It isn't on any map. That's your first clue something's off. But by now, you've learned that the most important places are the ones history tries to bury. You finally find it 3 days later, nestled in a shallow valley beneath a canopy of ash trees. The buildings are bones roofless, moss-laced, folded in on themselves like abandoned thoughts. And beneath it all, a staircase, stone steps disappearing into the earth. Cold air snakes up from the dark like a memory. It smells faintly of rot and rosemary. You descend. It's not a crypt, not quite. It's older. Carved tunnels, earthen halls reinforced with timber and iron brackets. There are symbols etched into the walls, some Christian, some pagan, and some that don't seem to belong to either. Your lantern flickers as you walk deeper. Shadows stretch like they're trying to remember your shape. Then at last, a door. It's wooden, cracked, and carved with a spiral that loops inward and never ends. You push it open. Inside, the room hums, not from sound, but from presence. And there she is, Thelma. She looks exactly as Adela described her, except younger. Her skin is taut, her eyes sharp, her hair the color of moonlight on slate. She doesn't seem surprised to see you. You found me, she says simply, her voice low and even. I thought you might. She leads you inside. The chamber is part library, part lab. Scrolls share space with dried herbs, metal instruments, and vials filled with sedimented liquid. There's a microscope here newer than it should be. Beside it, a tattered journal labeled Bloodlines. You sit. She begins to speak not in riddles, but in weary facts. She's been living here for years, tracing the lineage of resistance, not just through survivors of the plague, but through every major outbreak since typhus, smallpox, the Spanish flu, and now more modern threats. It always returns. She says, not just the sickness, the pattern, and the pattern, she believes, is not random. According to Thelma, there's a hypothesis she's been chasing, one most historians dismiss out of hand, that the Black Death wasn't a single pathogen, but a convergence, a co-infection, something that altered not just the immune system, but the human blueprint. She pulls out a scrap of papyrus. On it is a diagram somewhere between a family tree and a helix. Historians still argue whether this was prophecy or proto-science. She says, but I think it's both. She explains some people who survived the plague developed more than immunity. They developed genetic markers that allowed their bodies to learn across generations, to recognize and respond to pathogens they'd never encountered. You blink. You mean like inherited immunity? She nods, but faster, deeper, adaptive memory at the genetic level. It sounds like science fiction, but you remember Adela's blood maps, the monk's glowing vein sketch, your own strange resistance. None of it feels impossible anymore. She shows you another journal. This one's older, written in a hand you recognize. The healer's, her name is scribbled in the margins Iseld, and a note in the corner, he walks unharmed. The same phrase from the monastery. You feel dizzy. Thelma watches you. You're part of the line. Aren't you? You nod. Slow. I thought so. She says, the locket, Iseld's hair. You reach for it. Instinctively. It's warm. Always warm. Thelma sits beside you. Here's what I think. The plague didn't just kill. It selected, not by will, not like a god, but like fire selects what won't burn. It's a metaphor, but also something more. You feel it in your bones in that subtle way. Your skin seems to tighten just before someone coughs. In the way your dreams remember things, your waking self does not. Thelma has one last thing to show you. She opens a case and pulls out a scroll sealed in wax. This, she says, was found in the crypt of a plague doctor, sealed after his death. We only broke it last winter. You help unroll it. The parchment crackles like leaves. Inside is a drawing, a full-body sketch of a human figure surrounded by symbols, some familiar, some alien. At the top is a phrase in Latin, immunitas ex tenebris, immunity from darkness. The figure bears a resemblance to you. You think this is real, you ask. Voice thin, I think, Thelma says. We're looking at a warning, and maybe a map. You ask the obvious question. A map to what? She smiles, not kindly, to what comes next. You leave the underground hours later, heart pounding with thoughts you can't quite name. Outside, the air feels different, not cleaner, exactly, but hungrier, like the world knows you've changed. That night, you sleep under a ruined archway. The moon breaks through clouds like a reluctant eye, and in the distance, just barely, you hear something, not coughing, not crying, singing, a lullaby. You can't make out the words, but the melody is old, familiar, and it's coming from a village that no longer exists on any map. You close your eyes, and the song continues. You follow the singing at dawn. The valley hums with dew and soft mist, and each footstep feels less like a choice and more like an agreement, like your body is walking a path it remembers better than your mind does. The locket at your neck pulses faintly. You don't know if it's just your heartbeat echoing through it, or something more deliberate. The village appears slowly, like a smudge being wiped clean. First, the outlines low walls, thatched rooftops sagging under moss. Then finer details, a broken weather vane, a child's toy half buried in the mud, doors long off their hinges. The singing stops the moment your shadow crosses the village boundary. And just like that, you're alone again, but not empty, because something in this place, something very old, remembers you. You walk slowly, past the well filled with brackish water, past the chapel whose stained glass eyes have long since gone blind. At the edge of the village is a house, not grand, not ominous, just whole, intact, as if time skipped it by accident. Inside, the hearth is cold, but the ashes are recent. Someone has been here. You explore the room's low ceilings, stone floors, smells of rosemary and old paper. Then, tucked beneath a loose floorboard, you find it, a book. The leather is cracked, the pages delicate, but the ink is legible. Not a diary, not exactly. A record, an experiment, a confession. The author is Thelma. You read through the entries, heart thudding softly. She writes of blood samples that don't decay, of children born during plague years with unexplainable resistance, of visions passed through generations like genetic heirlooms, of names that appear in dreams before they're spoken aloud. And then she writes something stranger still. The line is not unbroken. It chooses, it forgets, it remembers, it sleeps, and sometimes it hides inside someone who doesn't yet know they are the key. You sit down, gently. The words crawl under your skin. She wasn't talking about some future descendant. She was talking about you. And somehow, you realize, so was Isolde, so was Adela, even the monks, in their cloistered panic, glimpsed at this thread running through time, pulling tightly now toward some unknown knot. Thelma left more behind a map, different from the others. It's not geographic, it's genealogical, a tree but strange, not branches from one root, but spirals radiating from a central figure. Each name on the map is someone you've encountered. Isolde, Adela, Thelma, and one name, in bold ink, circled twice, your own. You don't remember ever giving it to her. Suddenly, there's a sound, not footsteps, breathing. You turn and see a child standing in the doorway, maybe 8 years old, pale hair, wide eyes, barefoot, silent. She watches you for a long moment, then steps forward and takes your hand. You don't ask where you're going. You just follow, out through the village, into the woods, past the river that gleams like molten silver in the morning light. Finally, she stops at a clearing. There's a stone circle here, half swallowed by ivy. The child points to the center, then lets go of your hand and disappears into the trees without a word. In the center of the circle lies a single object, a mask. It's one of those plague doctor masks, long-nosed, expressionless, theatrical. But this one is different. It's made of bone, or something like it. You kneel. The mask is warm to the touch, and inside the mask, a folded note. You open it. One line, what the plague began. You must finish. It's unsigned. You sit in the grass, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or just lie down and let the forest take you. What does it even mean to finish a plague? Cure it, harness it, understand it. You think about Adela's words. Some truths change you. And maybe this is the final truth, the one that doesn't get carved in stone, but in blood, your blood. Because maybe it wasn't about surviving the Black Death. Maybe it was about what survival did to you, what it built, what it left behind. Not scars, instructions. You rise, the mask in your hand. The wind shifts, brushing your hair across your face like a farewell. And for a moment, everything, the locket, the names, the dreams, even the sickness feels like one long breath, drawn in by history, waiting to be exhaled by you. You don't know where to go next, but the path no longer feels confusing. It feels inevitable, because this isn't just a story about plague, is it? It's about you, what you carry, what you become, what you choose to do when the past finds you and whispers, now. And as you take your first step out of the circle, the world hums again low, steady, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. This time, it's not a warning, it's a welcome. So now, let's slow everything down. You're no longer in the forest, or the ruined village, or that shadowy underground lab. You're just here with the soft hush of air, the comfort of a dark room, and the faint rhythm of your own breathing. Let the edges of the story soften in your mind. Let the masks, the locket, the spiral map all drift quietly into the background like ripples in water that no longer needs to move. You've traveled a long way tonight, through centuries of fear, wonder, survival. You've seen how one disease reshaped not only the bodies of those who endured it, but maybe even the very blueprint of what it means to be human. That's heavy stuff, but it's okay to let go of it for now, because none of it asks anything from you not right now. The questions can wait. The mystery will still be here in the morning. Tonight, your job is only this rest. Let your limbs go heavy. Let your eyes grow slow and warm and heavy. 2. Think of quiet forests, of lullabies whispered by people long gone, but somehow still with you. And maybe your own blood is humming, softly, with the echoes of those who came before. You're safe, you're here, and the story is over. See you tomorrow night. Sweet dreams.